And here we have 5 guests that have experiential knowledge of the topic we've been discussing. I won't introduce everyone in detail, but I will say, just so that we have enough time to discuss, but these 5 people here thought about how they wanted to live, which was not on their own, not alone, but rather in multi-generational houses and cluster apartments. And they fought for this dream and in the end have been able to realize their dream. They are now living in multi-generational houses or homes, and they can now tell us their first-hand experience. Ms. Bruderer, you talked about the wisteria, the plants on the balconies, and the greenery, but I think that's not the only discussions you have. Verena Bruderer, you are the representative of the Solinsieme Cooperative in St. Gallen. 20 people live there, and up until now, 27 different people have lived there. Then we have Tina Held on the left. She is an artist and adult educator.
Tina Held war mit im ganzen Projekt Karthago, hat irgendwie hier die Idee...
Verena Bruderer worked in special education. Tina Held is living in Kalkbreite Cooperative in Zurich and might move at a later stage, who knows. Then we have Kurt Lampart. He co-founded the multi-generation house Giesserei in Winterthur. He really fought for this project. He helped develop it, and he lives there now. And he still looks very young, so it couldn't have been that hard. He was a social worker, and maybe that is why he feels so at home, literally, at Giesserei. Then we have Claudia Thiesen, who is an expert for innovative living forms and participative processes, because that is what she does with her company Thiesen and Wolf. She actually consults cooperatives, and she lives at Heizenholz, which is a cluster apartment, and she also helped out with Hobelwerk in Winterthur. And she is an architect. And then another architect, Ulrike Amos, she is part of the Coopérative Equilibre in Meran and lives there as well. And what I find interesting about her is that she is working on a prototype for 4-generation living in Geneva. Let me begin by saying this utopia and then actually reaching it. Can you remember how it felt when you actually achieved this goal just at the very beginning? So maybe over 20 years ago in your case, Ms. Bruderer, but what were you feeling when you went to live there? I actually remember quite well. When we started, the idea was a very personal one. I was very good friends with 3 women who were in a similar situation as I was. The children were all grown. We were empty nesters. We were unmarried, and we just wanted to live together. We didn't think about retirement or how we would live then, but we just wanted to live with each other. The idea wasn't to realize a living housing project. We just wanted to make sure that we were taken care of and that we weren't on our own. We didn't think that it would turn into what it has become today. What was important in the beginning was our passion and our vision that we had. One of the speakers mentioned this about the projects in Holland. It was just important to be passionate, to create together, to be passionate and create these ideas. And then, of course, they have to be implemented. But I just thought that burning for this idea and this passion that we felt was really a driving force. And then 20 years passed, and I feel like now there's something missing. We are happy with where we are and how it is, but something is missing. Everything is sort of mellow. We are becoming comfortable. Of course, we have the wisteria, we have the greenery, and we have renovation projects and so on. And we are proud of what we have created. But we have to remember how excited we were in the beginning. Claudia, Thiesen, you work with people like Verena, Bruderer. Is it very common to have people be very excited at the beginning and then sort of get a reality check later on? Well, there are a lot of projects in which the euphoria is very, very big at the beginning, but then maybe some expectations are not met, or just other issues. The project that I'm living in didn't really have this issue, but maybe also because we have more people, and because we were very involved in the perception and the implementation, and also because we knew that we can't influence everything. Would you say that the smaller the community, the bigger the risk of being let down? Well, maybe not always, but a certain size enables certain things. In our housing project, there are 100 people, including children, and this means that you know everyone, but you don't have the same relationship with everyone. It's not as close with everyone. You can maybe avoid certain people if you don't feel like seeing them. You don't always have the same topics or the same partners for discussion. And there are a lot of different people at different stages in life. That can be a factor as well. Lampart, I think there are 340 to 360 people living at Giesserei, where you live. It's a sort of in the suburbs of Winterthur, and a former industrial area. Is the size something that helped you maybe soften the blow of landing in reality? I was working at Prosenectute before I moved in, or when I moved in, and a association for a multi-generation house was having a meeting because they were looking for new residents. And I said to my friend, let's go, because maybe we can get some work out of that. We could accompany the transition, because we were specialists in this field. And so I went to the information evening, and I saw that they did not need anyone helping them out, but that actually I wanted to be a part of the project. My wife was a bit hesitant, and our children had already moved out, or were in the process of moving out. And we were looking for a new form of living. And I said, but I don't want to move into the suburbs, into the outback of Winterthur. I will never do that, but that's where I am now, and I love it. And what's the wonderful thing about it? It's just being together, having worked together on a project, realized a project together. We are self-managed, we focus on ecology, we are a car-free zone, and that's all some just ideas and things that we worked out ourselves. We are organized in the form of an association, and we are part of a housing cooperative. And being able to design our own home just feels really good. Sometimes it's annoying. There are problems, but we might talk about those later. Yes, let's stay with the wonderful things. Tina Held, you used to live at Karthago and then in different places, and now in Kalkbreite. What made you realize that getting into these concepts was something you wanted to do? And how is it to move there? Well, my partner and I lived in Karthago first in a large flared shaft, shared flat, and then we moved to a co-op slightly outside the city, but there was no sense of community whatsoever, and we became like the community workers for our building, and we had people people weren't interacting with each other, and when Kalkbreite had an opening, we thought it was a good idea to go there, but we weren't as involved in the preliminary phase. At Karthago, I had been very involved for years, and this time I wanted to stay out of it a little bit because I anticipated certain phases and issues. So I just decided to move in when it was ready. And was it a good decision to stay out of it the second time around? Your role was more the one of the person who just profits from the work of others. Well, yes, but I had the role of someone who was very actively involved from the beginning, as soon as I moved in, and brought life to the project, and was very excited to get to know everyone. It was a very large project. There are also a lot of working spaces, not just apartments. And we have a tenancy guideline. We have certain rules as regards age and the social status and so on, and that gave me the opportunity to get quite involved. Ulrike, there are different roles that you play. You are an architect, but you also live in a communal living project. Well, the project that I'm living in was not designed by me. I wasn't the architect there. I was more involved in participation, and someone else was the architect. But of course, it's nice to know the processes and stages that a project like this goes through. It was easy because I had a committee of future residents, and they got involved. And when we moved in, they said we are going to create a system, a support system, so that not everyone comes to you when there's an issue, but we have different people who take care of different issues. So I could just move swiftly and seamlessly from a head of project to resident. In the beginning, we very much compared it to a honeymoon because everything was rosy. And then after maybe 2 years or so, you see maybe certain deficits or quirks of other residents, and that's when you have to act and maybe change a few things. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? This image of the honeymoon is really lovely. Everything is rosy, and then the quirks come out, or you start getting annoyed at certain residents. How do you deal with that in your living projects? What are the tricks that you've sort of learned when it comes to dealing with these things? Of course, everyone says communication all the time, but how do you actually communicate? How do you do it? We have about 20 guidelines, and the most important one regards settlements or fighting. We really had to learn how to fight. In the beginning, there was a huge conflict because of the playground. They were building it, and they had developed the playground together with adults and children and experts, of course. And when they started building, all we saw was concrete and logs. And then a few people said we're vetoing the construction of this playground, and the conflict sort of led to two groups forming. It was old versus young. And some people said, well, you didn't have a playground when you were younger, and now you don't want us to have a playground, and so on. And we had to get a mediator for 8,000 francs, and it wasn't even very helpful. But we continued, and today the playground is the most wonderful place. So there are always conflicts, but it's more between the co-op and us from the project. Among each other, we have actually mediation committees that are elected for a year, and they don't have that much work actually. There are, of course, the conflicts among neighbors. There are maybe issues when it comes to the laundry, and that's when the commission comes in. But those are just little things. What about you, Ms. Bruderer? I think it's important to be able to and know how to fight or disagree. In my project, there are only 20 people, and it's more dangerous if you get into a fight than when the group is larger. We always talk about how we need to address conflicts. It's just the same as it is in different relationships. Conflicts arise, and we are not very good at dealing with them yet. We might still learn how to disagree better. But if you don't say things, if you just bottle it in and never let it out, then it really takes the joy out of living together. And that's something we're working on. Yes, it takes the willingness to approach the other people and to actually address these issues. Then just something regarding participation. At Kraftwerk 1, there's not a group of people that meet and develop something during 8 years and then move in together. There are a lot of changes. And participation is also about finding out whether or not you actually want to live and or work in a project such as the one you're working on. So some people leave, new people arrive, and that's the same applies after having moved in. A third of our residents live in shared flats, and there are a lot of changes there. And these changes are important. It's important to have new people with new ideas come in and give them the opportunity to share their ideas and to take those ideas seriously. there are structures that are open and very accessible. And that's fun for the residents as well. This is an aspect that is important to me. We do what we feel like doing, basically, and that makes people want to join us, and it causes good energy. And if you party together or have fun events together, then it's easier to maybe address issues because you have a better relationship. In the beginning, we had a meeting after we'd all moved in, at which we decided we would have a house book. And the house book just contains important factors of our living together, but I bet with you that most of the people don't know what it says anymore. But it was important because we talked about our values. We wrote in it how decisions would be made and so on. But I know that, of course, too many rules are not fun, so it was just to have it in writing. Ulrike, Amos, what's it like in the French-speaking part of Switzerland? You'd have no rules, right? Well, we don't like them as much. But this morning, a lot of speakers spoke about communication. We all have our specific ways of communication, and maybe when we're living with other people, these ways of communication don't always work. The residents once said that they would like to take a class in communication, in non-violent communication. And now a majority of our adult residents are actually trained in non-violent communication. And they tend to think twice before they say something when it comes to conflicts. So that has been very helpful. In our regulations, it always said that you are allowed to address things, but you must respect the privacy of your neighbor. But then privacy was meant something else for all of the residents, or cleanliness is interpreted differently by everyone. So it takes rules that apply to everyone. And if you are not happy with something, then you have to communicate it, but not by saying you're an idiot, but rather by saying this can't go on this way. At Giesserei, we have a system that's called mandatory work. And just everyone has to do their share, because we checked how many hours it takes to keep the house in shape. And then we found out that every adult has to do 30 hours of work per year just to keep the house in shape, keep it clean, and so on. And for most people, that's fine because they're doing a lot of work for the project anyway, because they're on committees and so on. Other people are not very happy about it and don't really like doing any work for the house. But we do have a lot of work. For example, we need a lot of people on the board. And we know that, for example, this work, should we find people to do the hours, to work these hours so that we can have a party, or should we force people to organize the party so that they can work off their hours, or how should we do it? So we are working on motivating people to do some work for the benefit of the community.
What about in Kalkbreite? Well, this all sounds, well, I would say where we are after 9 years now. we're a bit deflated, to be honest with you, because it's a long process of understanding what to do with the terraces and the courtyards, and we needed to decide what to do about that because they are public and people come into Kalkbreite. And we realised that actually we would like to have some of the terraces be just for us. And in architectural terms, it's not actually easy to split those off. And so there was an extensive communal process where we talked about having more shade, having more greenery, and then there was a great deal of work to do to accommodate those things. And I was often there, mucking in, shoveling earth, planting flowers, and really just trying to put some of the work in for people over 50 or even over 60. And just really trying once again to win over a few extra people for new little jobs that had not previously been taken care of. And I look forward to the end of March because then there are a few more people arriving. I'm not sure what will actually happen. I think there'll be the same 7, 8 people coming and possibly no new faces, but I see you nodding. I think that maybe this is just part of it, isn't it? That it's a bit of ebb and flow in terms of how much energy is invested into the project. But I think that that's not the worst thing either, really, because initially you're invested and then over time maybe you're a little bit more focused on yourself, and it's a bit of a shame because the world, life goes on, but it's also important to have people be involved. But obviously it is just the way it is that people will recurrently be the same people working on things, or that things will do the same. So I don't mean to belittle this concern, but I think these administrative tasks are just there in the background, and sometimes people just don't have time to do any gardening. It's the same for us, and I think I've gotten used to it in that it's always really the same people who do something about things. But, that's the same in society at large as well, isn't it? There are people who like to do their bit, who like to carry things forward in society. That's always been a topic, that it's always the same people doing these things. And I think if you try to impose rules on that and having work assigned, sure, you can try that. But, well, I think we found our path. I found my path, because if I want to be able to organise an event, say, for my siblings, then I look for people in the building that want to participate, and then I do it because that's what I want to do and because it's fun, and there is space for that. There is space for me to create something, and I don't do gardening anymore, and that's not because nobody else was doing it, because I like gardening, but I'm just not so much looking to the left and to the right. But I think that's a normal development. It's normal that not everybody does the same amount. And that's what Evelyn Althaus was getting at when she was saying that there are different roles. There are those who are dreamlike, those who make things happen. Well, I do notice that the system of self-management that we have in our settlement, we don't have a janitor. We do all of our own cleaning. We do all of our own maintenance. We communicate we've got an intranet, and I think we're doing a good job of that. And in the beginning, we didn't know how that would work, having this new co-op and so many new people, how that really would work with self-management. And we arrive at our limitations and we look for solutions. And at the moment, there's a conversation ongoing about having a secretary for the board. Initially, we had essentially an assistant for our project who worked 40%, and over the course of a year, after a year, this person resigned for whatever reason. And then you have the people in charge of different aspects of the project and who are not able to take on the burden of what they've been assigned. And so with everything coming together, social life there, across all levels, it just was cut back. And so this person left after a year. And now we're picking back up on that. We're looking to find help for the board. And this is what we're paying for ourselves. We're not saying we're going to do everything ourselves, but we're going to decide what needs to be done, and then we're going to make sure it gets done by certain people. Yeah, I had a very similar experience, actually. I think it's difficult to introduce structure when you have to decide, well, in principle, there are groups who are a bit more able to make these decisions, and then actually other people might have an opinion on this too. So yes, this is something that we've also experienced. But first, I think you have to make your way through these conflicts. You have to experience conflict to arrive at a way to deal with it. And over the course of doing that, it's enriching to be able to stumble over these things and for it to go on and for this to be done better each time. You mentioned stumbling over these things, and this is perhaps in conjunction with honesty. Is there something that you would say you wanted to achieve but couldn't or didn't? And that perhaps there is a certain disappointment around that? Rather than saying, it didn't kill us, made us stronger, is there something where you actually say, we're disappointed we couldn't do it? Well, we had a hurdle like that. We have had one. And sometimes it's an issue and sometimes it isn't. And that is about whether or not, it's a question of a restaurant. So operated by a tenant. Yeah, so a leasee. And the restaurant for us was a social environment, a cultural environment, and it really a meeting place. And culturally and socially, it just doesn't work. Because the restaurant doesn't open until 10 o'clock in the morning, and then Saturday, Sunday is closed. And so then where do you meet up? Sure, we have a communal area and a large room, but there's just a lack of suitable spaces to be able to just get cozy and it be nice and informal and spontaneous. And you say, oh, look, Regula's here, Hans and Peter's here. Oh no, Peter's in there, won't bother popping in. And now we are kind of reconstructing that so it's independent of the restaurant so that we can have a communal area that is serviced. And that costs some money, but we hope that will be the communal area that we need, and that the threshold to spending time there just becomes lower. Because at the very top, then you've got a slipper bar. We were stealing this name from somewhere else, I think, but it's a kitchen and a huge terrace. It's sunny, it's light and airy, and the idea being then that you can meet there, maybe celebrate something, and kids playing on the terrace, and it just didn't work. The young people just basically colonized this area. Great. And they had huge parties there too from coming out of the Giesserei, and then we had noise complaints and the police coming in and shutting things down, and we needed rules, and so that's the interaction and correlation with the neighborhood then too. But are there things that you were not able to realize in Kalkbreite, say? I'm trying to think. I have been thinking about it this whole time. I don't think that there really was something tangible that we wanted to achieve that we couldn't. I think really we didn't have all that many rules. And this has advantages and disadvantages, but I don't think I have anything to add on this. Well, for us in our integration project, we wanted to address the structure. And, with this being a very Swiss middle class as an assumption, we wanted to incorporate refugees as well. And then the question was, how do you integrate refugees? Which refugees are you able to accommodate? And the working group was a little bit concerned about saying, we don't want to choose this person because this guy doesn't seem as nice as this other person. And then these were all refugees that had been in Switzerland for over 15 years and already had a Swiss passport, And some of them have become very well integrated and others just really have not. And in the last 5 years, the working group has done nothing at all to accommodate the integration after the fact. And now we've arrived at this point where one of the 3 flats have to be excluded from the selection pool because we just have to maybe take our ambitions down a notch so that, we do see that there's a great deal of commitment required from inhabitants to make these things happen, and sometimes you just can't do it. And that was a huge disappointment. Yes, this is also a point that I would address, and that this is not in our project, but at other projects, I think. The Hunziker project, for example, that's been mentioned today, I think it's very diverse, and there are also people there who aren't Swiss, but if you look at the boards, then it seems that it's not really possible to integrate these people so well into the overarching structures, into the organization of things. And secondly, attitudes towards, well, you're confronted with, people just say, oh, it's typical, isn't it? Refugee families not doing their bit. Well, my neighbor Kibra has a little son. She is originally from Somalia, and she is a co-worker herself. She's barely able to look after her own son to the extent that she would like, because there are such working hours involved. And obviously, this person is not going to be spending 3 hours on an evening investing in the overarching project. And we see them, her and her son, they are actually contributing in their own way, and in a way that is important to them too. And so we have to really think about what commitment actually is. Are you only committed if you're happy to sit there for 3 hours and talk about whether or not you need a rabbit run, or is it enough to be a committed member of the community? And surely that's added value as well, that there is this value to fresh blood coming in and things being revitalized and overturning the majority a little bit. I think for us as well, the refugee of ours from Somalia herself, it's a bit tricky at times, but the other 3 or other 2 families that go out of the house and they have a car, even though we're not supposed to have a car. Yeah, you can't always make it work, and sometimes it's just a bit difficult living together, isn't it? But it's an experience, and then you ask, how do you deal with that? So what about in Solinsieme? Is there something there where you said, actually, this is what we wanted to achieve and we weren't able? It's just like I was saying before, in that there are conflicts that arise, the communication and how we deal with this, with other people who live there too, that I think this is something that we are not as successful as, because we're looking to protect ourselves, basically. And sometimes, perhaps, if we're talking about good things that have happened, there's a long list, but there is another inhabitant who's a bit younger. She's a bit different. But, that's not the point, is it? But it always comes back to this point of her not wanting to talk about old age living. And about 2 years after she moved in, she fell pregnant, had a child. And the child is 18 years old now, still living in the building. But this woman, she just doesn't really fit in. You know, at times she's bullied. She's just a bit different. But she has a Swiss passport. She contributes a great deal. She has the same values. And I think that is a bit sticky because she's always a little bit kind of cast aside, and she has to fight for her place in the environment. I think that's. But look, she's determined to stay. But that's not so nice. I think that's also something that can happen. Yeah, but I think it's actually nice to close this panel discussion with a story that's not all that pleasant, because we've heard so much good stuff about this way of living. And I think the things that you've presented to us today, well, yeah, there are challenges that do arise where intergenerational living, you know, from the very beginning, the whole conference has emphasized that there are just very different manifestations of this, and there are some options to overcome certain problems, provide solutions, but then that the utopia has to be approached carefully, and that people come into this from different backgrounds. Thank you very much indeed for being so honest with us and open to. I'm sure there are thousands of things we would like to talk to you about. But as a little appetizer, that's nice. And of course, you're free to continue to chat over the upcoming reception. And perhaps you might find people who have had similar experiences. So thank you very much indeed for sharing yours.